Rick Bayless, my culinary mentor.
Legend, of
course, came down and he was teaching cooking school at a cooking school that a friend of mine ran. And she said, I know you really love Rick, and I've been following him for a number of years. Do you want to be his assistant that day?
And their ego took over because, you know, who are you telling me what to do? You don't know. And then you go, oh, actually, I do know, mate.
Food diva. I had no idea who she was. And she came into the restaurant. She was one of the first bloggers to find us very early. Like, we opened in December and she was there like early February. And I didn't know. I had no idea. And then somebody else comes in and is like, do you know who that is? And I was like, who?
Welcome back to the ChefJKP Podcast. And on the show today, we have Lash, who's the chef and founder of the one and only Lila Taqueria. Welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
First things first, favorite childhood food memory?
Really, this connects me to my current culinary path. We started going to Mexico. I'm from Texas. And we started traveling to Mexico when I was very young. I think on my first trip, I was 10, 11 years old, something like that with my family. And we were in a tiny little beach town that's not very special. It's on the western coast, sort of between Mazatlan and Acapulco, called Topolobampo. And it didn't really ring for me that it would have significance in my future culinary. But I remember, like, there was a shack, like screen door. We had just finished the beach. My parents were like, let's grab some food. And I vividly remember it was like a split mahi slathered in like melted garlic butter with fresh lime and a huge stack of corn tortillas. And it was just like seared into my brain.
Wow.
How important this food was going to be to me, and how important my journey with Mexican food would be. Fast forward, 15 years, I ended up working at the restaurant Topolobampo, which is one of Rick's restaurants, and my culinary mentor. And he said, it's not that great of a town, but I love the word. And I didn't know that when I was 10 years old, I would be sitting in that town with like 50 people. And then end up working in, it was the first Mexican Michelin-starred restaurant in the world. So
wow, what a journey.
Yeah. So that for me, and I still talk to my brother. My brother was with me for that fish, and we still say, like, every time we do whole roasted split fish with tortillas, we're chasing that memory, like every time.
Wow. So then in Texas, what sort of food were you leaning towards as a teenager?
Yeah, my parents were, sort of old hippies. And so we grew up with pretty diverse culinary, influence at home. My mom cooked during the week and my dad cooked on the weekends. We pretty much we didn't go out to restaurants very much. We lived out in the suburbs. So we were foodies and there wasn't great food in the suburbs. So we cooked a lot of like, Thai and Mexican and all sorts of like interesting culinary things. I remember as a kid, I'd be picky. My dad would send blue corn tortilla chips in my lunch and I would say they're moldy because they were blue corn. And I remember looking back, and now, of course, it's so funny that you reflect on all those memories and you reflect on, that influence. But those were huge influences for me growing up as a child.
So as the parents, who was doing what? Who was pastry and who was savory?
Totally. So dad was like fun times, which is like the weekend, like big swing for the fences, grill, smoking, meats, etc. And mom was like sort of practical weekday. So that was sort of the way it split in our house, which, and still to this day, like, we are a huge foodie family. It's really was influenced. My journey to Mexico was being so inspired by food in general. So
yourself and your brother, were you helping out during the weekend or were you just chilling or what?
No, definitely. I remember when I was 15, I said, I'm going to make Thanksgiving. I'm going to do it all. And I told my mom, like, I pulled all the cookbooks out from her collection, all the old magazines in print, because back then it was like, you got a physical magazine in the mail every month. And I wrote the whole menu. And I went and did all the shopping because I was like, I'm going to do Thanksgiving dinner.
So sure, let me stop you right there. For those who have never had the pleasure of a Thanksgiving dinner.
Correct.
Run me through the menu first,
Totally.
so I understand the prep involved.
It's a turkey, for sure. There's questions about how you do it. I think in the last number of years, there's been a lot more innovation on deep fried or spatchcocked or whatever. But back when I was a kid, it was roast. Lots of sides. Be creative, be interesting. There's always traditional stuff. There's the potatoes, there's the stuffing, and there's lots of pie.
Okay.
That's sort of the hallmarks of. But then again, like as I get older, I do twists. I remember I did one the year that the Momofuku cookbook came out, which was an incredible bomb that David Chang released like in the early 2000s. And I made an entire Bosom Thanksgiving one year where I roasted the pork roast and all the sides and the lettuce wraps and the bun and the steamed buns and everything. So anyway.
Wow. So then how many people were coming to this?
10.
So you had 10 people to cook for?
Yeah.
How did it go?
Very good. I remember, it's so funny, like all these little memories that stick in your mind. I remember I had to look up what a compound butter was because I didn't know. And that was the recipe, was like a lemon herb compound butter. And I remember like blending it and then like chilling it and rolling it in wax paper to like have, what a compound butter is. But it went very well. And it began to fuel my food, like giving my care and love through food, which is a huge part of like my journey, has been like, that's my love language, is food. And so it started for me very much with my home environment.
So then as you got a little bit older through education, what was the path that you decided to go down? Was it culinary or was it something completely different?
Yeah, I was always very, very, very passionate as, a sort of next level home cook, more or less. And I had been very, very, very interested in the Mexican cuisine. And there were some really great sort of scholarly books. And the two sort of big figures are Rick Bayless and Diana Kennedy. And they were writing about the culinary traditions of Mexico in a way that hadn't really been done, especially in the English language yet. The history and the regions and the influences and the indigenous influences with the Spanish colonial and what happened and how that worked. And, the spice trade going across Mexico and influencing sauce making and this whole story. And I was obsessed. I was completely obsessed. I like poured over the books. I like flew to Chicago to go to Frontera. And I was just obsessed. And so I went to Mexico and I started working in Mexico. And that's really when I started becoming professional. I started working at restaurants and I started my own little sort of catering private chef company in Mexico. And that's when I just really was able to get quite serious with that food tradition and seeing it and going to the markets and like getting really good at Spanish, of course, which is a huge part of my relationship with that tradition, is speaking the language. So that was, I call my education with those years of I was in Mexico. And during that time is when I met Rick, and Diana. So, and that really just sort of solidified my obsession.
So, but you were a chef previously, or you had something else before?
The producer came between. It was
okay.
It was in the middle. Yeah. So I studied politics. I mean, at university, I studied political science,
as you do,
as one does. At University of Texas in Austin, UT. And, but I was always a passionate cook. And so then I went to Mexico in my early 20s. And then I sort of became much more sort of educated on the professional side. Rick Bayless, my culinary mentor.
Legend,
of course, came down and he was teaching cooking school at a cooking school that a friend of mine ran. And she said, I know you really love Rick, and I've been following him for a number of years. Do you want to be his assistant that day? And I said, sure, I would love to. I was like, quaking in my boots. And he was there with one of his sous chefs at the time.
Was he nice?
Very. And I was just like obsessed. And so we exchanged details. We started to stay in touch. And then Frontera famously has this summer trip that they take every year where Rick and Deanne bring their entire crew to Mexico.
Right.
And it's like 20, 30 people because they believe very deeply that you could be a chef in Chicago and have never gone to Mexico and not understand what it is they're trying to do. So these trips are legendary. They always choose a region and it's like highly curated, and we go to really great restaurants, but we go to markets, but we cook at people's homes. It's like they're amazing. And so they brought their crew to my part of Mexico the next summer. And it was like baptism into like the incredibleness of Frontera, like all at once, because they were all there. All the people that I ended up working with for many years all came. And I was like, I want to be a part of this. Like, I want to be a part of this. And so I had been in touch with Rick, and I said, I really want to move to Chicago and work for you. And he said, we're going to open a new restaurant soon. You should get here soon. And I said, okay.
How soon?
Like a month. So I wrapped up Mexico. Rick calls. Like my brother said, it's like you got called up to the Yankees. And I said, yes, it is like I got called up to the Yankees. So I wrapped up Mexico and I flew into Chicago. And I started, in the Frontera kitchen. And then I flipped over to Topolo. And then I spent a year working on all the development for his first restaurant he opened in 25 years was a street food restaurant called Choco. So I spent a year in development doing Choco for him, and then opened Choco and was the head chef for Choco.
So what I wanted to sort of put together is the piece of the puzzle, which is how did you go from politics to culinary?
I think culinary was always there, Culinary was always in my heart. And I think culinary school, I guess, just didn't resonate with me. But I think when I started to get really serious about the whole picture of Mexican food, and then flipping into a professional environment, it just made sense for me. It was just like one of those things where it's like, I've always loved this, but then, having a degree also informs your, ability to communicate, and it informs your ability to build business relationships, and it informs your ability, to pitch to investors, and it informs your ability to, I've done a lot of public speaking, and so something like this is something I'm comfortable with, where that's not maybe necessarily the case with people that have a much more sort of, I just want to be a chef. And so, so I think I got incredibly lucky with my professional relationship with both Rick and this other woman I worked for many years, Diana Kennedy. And so I think that also just really influenced like understanding and seeing that this was a path I was really interested in taking.
So how old were you when you finished your degree, first of all?
22.
So from the age of 22,
22.
Then did you decide to go straight to Mexico?
No, I spent a couple of years in Austin hanging out, cooking a lot, and working in politics for like 2 or 3 years.
But were you cooking also professionally on the side?
I was doing like sort of supper clubby type stuff, and big meals for friends, like organized, produced, multi-course sort of big meals for friends. Holidays, the Christmases, the Thanksgivings, those sort of things that you do in growing up in the United States. And that was for a couple of years. And then I did a big trip around the world for a year. So actually, I went to Latin America, I'm mixing up my trips. Went down to Latin America, and I was traveling in Brazil and Central America and a couple other places. And my mother was staying in Mexico at the time. And so she said, come hang out with me. And that's what started me there.
Okay.
And so then I was 24, 25.
So when you started in the kitchens, it wasn't a culture shock in terms of the hours, the work, the physicality of everything?
No, definitely the real culture shock happened when I got to Frontera.
Okay.
To Rick.
So so then that's what I'm saying is that. So
that
you've
was
gone from
incredible.
these sort of kitchens in Mexico.
Sure.
Which have a certain standard. So then you went to Rick Bayless.
Correct.
Stepped it up.
I got called to the Yankees, as my brother said.
How was your first day?
Oh my gosh. It's tough. You're, sort of navigating and figuring out, there's a hierarchy, there's relationships, there's, politics in its own way, a lot of politics in its own way. They were a little skeptical of me at first because I sort of just appeared from Mexico and got put into a role that everybody was still trying to figure out. But it's a magical place. I mean, they just celebrated their 38th year open, Frontera Grill. 38 years. And it's open 5 days a week. It's closed Sunday, Monday. So the culture is very strong because the staff is permanent.
Right.
There's no schedule.
How many staff?
I mean, gosh, there's probably like front and back is probably like 100 or more, because you have Topo La Mampo and you have Frontera Grill and you have Shoko. They're all next to each other on Clark Street in Chicago. They share a back house. They're all connected. It's like a maze of doors and walk-ins and whatever. Hi. Exactly. Behind.
Yeah.
But it was incredibly interesting because the culture, they just celebrated their 38th year. There's been a lot of photos online of the line. I know almost everybody on that line. They're all still there.
So
it is incredible.
But why are they staying there for so long?
There's a culture, there's an integrity, there's a loyalty, there's a level of execution that is just like you've never seen. Like, it's just, Rick was very early on with the farmers market relationships. He was one of the original sort of founding sort of leaders of the farmers market in Chicago, Green City Market. And so there's a cadence of the seasons, there's a cadence of the Mexican influences, there's a cadence of the events that sort of run that culture, that run that schedule of the Chicago restaurant scene. And I think, you just really develop a certain culinary tradition and you realize like, this is your thing, like this is your passion, is being able to like execute, these sauces and execute these flavor profiles, so.
But also like 38 years in quite a tough industry
is
amazing. And also to keep the staff loyal to you.
100%.
Unbelievable.
It's incredible. Like, that's one of the things I think is just so fascinating about that world and that I observed and as being a part of it was, it's like a family. It is a family. He's created a family. They grow up and their kids get jobs at the restaurants and their nephews get jobs at the restaurants. And the loyalty to quality is very, very, very high. All the dairy, all the, flour, all the sugar is very thoughtfully sourced and very thoughtfully put. I remember once there was a chef I was working with a lot, and he was like, any other restaurant I've worked at, there's like the expensive butter for the table, and then there's like the cheap butter for like pastry. It's like, I've never seen a restaurant where like everything is the best. Like, every single thing that we use is like the best quality of whatever it can be, And you got to know the farmers. You got to know they would come to the back door and bring, ramps when spring was happening in Chicago and strawberries and, early spring. And you got to know what that felt like and what those relationships felt like and how important it was and the flexibility you had to have when farmers, it's not always there. And sometimes there's a storm that comes and everything gets wiped out and you have to like recalibrate and you have to understand what that looks like,
But what were your biggest lessons during your time with Rick?
Oh, gosh. Definitely building relationships, and also just an incredible sense of loyalty to that culture. Obviously the food. The food's amazing. He's any one time we'd be in the prep. You always start in the prep. That's where you start in Rick's Kitchens, is in the prep department. There's usually a sous chef that runs it, and there's a whole army of interns and line cooks and stuff that are all blending and straining all day, because we have like huge buckets of black mole and mole poblano and everything else. And so a big part of that kitchen is the chili sauces, and there's dozens depending on what the menu is. And so you learn a lot about that. It's in the French kitchen, they have their own approach to sauce making. And in the Mexican kitchen, we have our own approach to sauce making. And what is a mole, and what is a pipián, and what is a chili sauce, and what is this, and what are salsas, and what is raw, and what is cooked, and what is fried, and how does it all work together? And that was a huge baptism with him, because it was like an encyclopedia of what it looked like, and specifically how it relates to restaurants. Because how you cook in a home kitchen is obviously very different than how you plate in a restaurant. And so seeing how that food was translated in was what Rick was really great at, like translating it into a restaurant environment. So yeah.
How long were you there for in total?
7 years.
7 years?
Yeah.
So then what made you step away?
I sort of was starting to realize like it's a big shadow that it casts, and I'm not sure if like, where do you go after this? What do you do if you're completely entrenched and enamored with this cuisine, there's got to be something else, because the logical next thing is you have your own place. But
you were locked in. I mean, 7 years.
Yeah, but at that point I had worked. I had gone into an R&D role, a research and development role. I had helped on a cookbook that he had done for cocktails and snacks and street food. I had been, and that led me to what I was really interested in next, which is Rick has a television show, One Plate at a Time. And there was always a cadence within our schedule to produce the show. And so that's how I became a producer, a culinary producer, is that I was working with Rick on his show. And so I was really interested in this intersection between food and media. I thought it was just fascinating, like how you put that together and how you told these stories. And so I just really felt like it was time to take a little bit of a break from the rigor of, like I think I've heard a couple of chefs on here, you miss all the birthdays, you miss all the weddings, you miss all the holidays, you miss everything. And you're like, if this is what it is, I have to figure out if this is really what I'm going to do forever, or do I want to see if there's another way? And I was really, really, really fascinated with telling stories with food. And so I started becoming a culinary producer with Rick, and then I left and I worked for a really cool startup that moved me to New York. And then I was consulting on restaurants in New York. And I was doing videos for the New York Times, and I was doing videos for Eater. And then I became a bit more of a producer. So
when it comes to the media side of things, especially in the US, how big is culinary and the media in that region?
Totally. I mean, I think the tones are frequently set from the media platforms that come out of the US when you look at although I should mitigate that now. This was 2014, 15, 16 were the years I'm talking about. A lot of things have changed in the rise of sort of bloggers and video platforms that are independent. Whereas I feel like back then it was more like you had to have a major platform to distribute content. Whereas I think now, obviously, look in Dubai, look at the major players that are pushing media out. A lot of them are independent food bloggers and independent, people like yourself that are creating content that is something that's a bit more independent. But I think back then, when we were all still trying to figure out what Instagram was about, and we were all still trying to figure out how this worked, you needed a much more traditional platform to get reach. And so I was working, you would in New York especially, the major guys were all there. You had, Cooks Illustrated, you had New York Times, you had Eater, you had the big Whole Foods Market. You had these big platforms that were producing content, and they were the ones that you wanted to work for because they had budget and they had the ability to get a crew together. But crews have gotten cheaper now. Equipment's gotten cheaper now. You don't need nearly as much as you used to need as far as the innovations that have happened within that space,
So what I'm really interested in is you have this background as a chef. Then you have within that R&D, which is more technical. So then you go into executive producing, which is like being an executive chef of a kitchen per se.
Same thing.
However, when did you have times when you were filming with chefs and their ego took over because, who are you telling me what to do? You don't know. And then you go, oh, actually, I do know, mate.
So there was I worked for this really cool culinary video platform that I think it was acquired by, I don't remember who, it was acquired by a TV network. But back in the day, it was called Panna, Panna, as in the cream that rises to the top. And they were one of the early cook-along video platforms on the iPad. And the iPad was just really trying to sort of figure out how it was going to get structure, how it was going to be facilitating. And the guy who started it had a really great idea. He was like, I want to encourage home cooks to be able to make cool recipes, and I want to do it with chefs. And
so it was cooking live with the chef?
No, but the videos were long and they were broken up.
Okay.
And so the video would be 27 minutes long, and it would be broken up into these scenes so that you as a home cook could actually cook along with your iPad. versus something that was like on YouTube that was like 3 minutes.
Yes.
Right. And I very early on was shooting with Nancy Silverton, Michael Tusk, Sean Brock, Jonathan Waxman.
Big names, eh?
Big names, big, huge names for the culinary world in the United States. Seamus Mullen, many. And it was really wonderful because they really resonated with me as their face producer because they knew I knew what I was talking about. And they knew that I had this background and this history as a chef. And that if I was directing them and giving them feedback and giving them instruction on the best way for the camera to do this, that they would respect it because they totally understood that I had come from that world,
so it was super constructive, basically.
And I would always, usually when we would fly in to work with these guys locally, we'd fly to LA to work with Nancy, we'd fly to San Francisco to work with Michael, etc. I would spend a day in their kitchen with their crew, getting ready.
Right.
Going and gathering all the ingredients and, going and working with Nancy's pastry chef to get the biscuits ready and going and working with Michael's crew to make sure everything was ready. And so that gave, but then I was comfortable in that environment because I was comfortable being in a professional kitchen. And so it gave them a lot of relief because I wasn't just an outsider as a producer.
But just to put it into context for people who don't work in the TV industry, the exec producer is the big boss.
Totally.
Right? So the fact that the exec producer then is going into the kitchen and doing quite almost
small.
hard labor. Still.
Yeah, but yeah, definitely. And we were definitely, we were small crews. But the producer, I have a lot of friends from my producer years. I have a lot of, DPs and gaffers and all sorts of buddies of mine. And I just would always tell them it's the same thing. We're just putting a video out versus putting a dish out. It's the same hierarchy. It's the same very specific skill set. It's the same sort of you kind of go to battle together in the same way that you go to battle together for service. And you're lockstep and you have a very sort of shorthand language that you communicate. It's the same. It's just
managing people.
Yeah, managing people, politics, relationships, loyalty. It's a bit blue collar. It's the same. It's totally the same. And so for me, it was a very easy transition to get into that world. And over time, I just felt that my interest in telling broader stories just was growing. And so I sort of expanded beyond culinary, and I worked at a creative agency in New York for a couple of years that actually did a lot of fashion. We did a few video series for culinary with Chef Curtis Duffy from Ever in Chicago, and some other people as well. But that's actually what brought me to Dubai, that moment, because I got a job here as a producer. That's what brought me here in 2016. So it's a whole world, all the way around. And so when I was here, when I first arrived in 2016, I was a producer. I wasn't in food. But I recognized that there was a lot of opportunity. I mean, I think 2016, 17, I still reflect back, Homegrown was just getting going, barely. I've talked to Stasha, my dear friend at 21 Grams. They had just sort of gotten going in their original location, and I didn't even know about it back then. Raw was here, but they were Nightjar didn't open until 2018, I think. And so the only place you would go to get latte art flat white would be Raw. I mean, I think, everything was going to get going in the years after, but there really wasn't much. So I would reflect as a chef and be wow, I think there's a lot of opportunity here. And then in the future, there would be a lot of opportunity here.
So then if we fast forward to 2019, 2020.
So I left and I went to Amsterdam
in
18. And I wrote out Amsterdam Corona. I was in Amsterdam during Corona. So I was here 2016 to 18. And I had always wanted to live in Europe. I always wanted there to just be some time in my life. Maybe I'd love it. Maybe I'd stay. Maybe I wouldn't. I wasn't sure. I had interviewed for jobs in London and Berlin in production.
In production, okay.
In production. And then I was always cooking passionately on the side. I was always, doing weekly.
The fire was still there.
Yeah,
right?
I would always do weekly events, and I would always do gift food to friends and, gift dinner parties and stuff to friends. And then I ended up landing in Amsterdam. And Corona was really what set off my desire to do Lila. I think when all the restaurants were gone, I missed them. When they were all of a sudden, that culture was gone. That culture of being a regular, that culture of like having your favorite dishes, that culture of like being inside, a restaurant that you really love. When it was like gone, I was like,
overnight.
Yeah, overnight. It awoke in me this like, oh, I want my own finally. Like I'm ready. Like maturity. You have to obviously wear a lot of hats when you're going to be the founder and you're going to own it and you're going to raise money and you're going to manage it. You have to wear a lot of hats. And maybe, there's a maturity level that you have to get to be able to manage all that, manage people, develop a culture, be mature enough to maintain the culture, like all those things. And at the time I met my partner, my husband, Tarek. And I think our sort of brainstorm was like, why don't we try to do this in Dubai? I had history. I had years here. I had connections. I had contacts. Tarek's from the region. He's Syrian. And so we just came back and started poking around and immediately got traction.
So then how long did the concept take to sort of come alive from the time you and Tarek were thinking of it?
Totally. So I actually, for a minute, thought, let's do this in Amsterdam. And I did a whole summer of pop-ups, which is where the original, if you go onto our Instagram, I think there's still like 1 or 2 photos at the very, very, very bottom of our Instagram account that are the backyard pop-ups that I hosted. I had a wood grill. I had a small mill. I was getting corn and I was like just seeing what I could do with it. And it was really nice because it gave me an opportunity to like have something tangible to talk about, not just like a deck with like images from the internet. Yeah. I had like food I could talk about. I had a menu I could talk about. I had, a visual moment. And I think I just realized that Amsterdam just wasn't a good fit for what I wanted to do. Dubai is far more multicultural and open to different flavors than I think my experience was then. And so that was like a summer. That was the summer of 2021. Yeah, summer. The next spring, I was here. I had my presentation from the summer before. I was speaking to people. I quickly found traction that spring. Spent the summer in fit out, and we opened that next December of 22.
So it's quite quick.
Yeah. It was. And I think that's one of the reasons that I really felt like Dubai was the place, because it happened quite quickly. We got lucky with our, Tarek and I tell the story, like we got rejected from several of the big developers early on for a Lila location. They didn't know. I didn't have history in the region as a chef. It was a deck. They love proven concepts and they love history. They like stability, the big developers. So we got rejected. And I'd always wanted and loved Jumeirah. I'd always loved the culture of Beach Road. I think it's very authentic. I think a lot of really great homegrown concepts have launched out of Jumeirah. When you look at, again, Reef, 21 grams, 3 fills, Orphaly, like they're all, there's a tradition there if you're really independent that you launch there. And I think it maybe has to do with the flexibility of landlords versus the bigger guys. It's just harder to get in when you're unproven. When you're going to go to Emar, they're going to be like, I don't know. And so we would drive up and down, and I would be taking pictures and saving it on Google Maps, and Tarek would be driving slow, and we'd be looking for lease signs. Because that's how it happens on Jumeirah, is that they put a lease, they don't list it on Beirut or whatever. They put a lease sign out. And whoever's the first to call is the one who gets the location.
So that's how we
found it.
And tell me about the name. Why Lila Taqueria?
Totally. So those years in Mexico, when I was in my early 20s, I was speaking Spanish all the time, and my friends were all Mexicans from the community. And nobody could say Shaw, Chow, Che, Cha, with like eyebrows like this and annoyances.
Cho?
Yeah, Cho. And I hated it because it's my grandmother's maiden name and I love my name. And it would make me cringe. And if you know Mexico, you also know that similar to the Arab world, everybody has like the same 5 names. Everybody sort of has Catholic Mexican names like Jose, Juan, et cetera, et cetera. So everybody has a nickname. similar to the Arab world where everybody has some other nickname, right? And so they said, you need to choose a nickname. This is not working for you, Chow, Che, whatever. And I was obsessed with this really incredible singer and activist from Oaxaca named Lila Downs. And I'd seen a lot of her concerts and I had just been a big fan. And I looked down at my iPod at the time, like the old one that made clicking noises.
Yes.
And I saw like her name on the song and I went, I'll be Lila. So that became my name in Mexico. And I have to tell you that when I got hired by Rick and I went to Chicago, I had to tell him because he was processing my ID for my work, my payroll. I had to tell him my name wasn't Lila legally. He didn't know. Because everybody only knew me as Lila. And if I go into the Frontera Quick Kitchen now, it'll be Hola Lila, because they will not know that they will never use, because everybody in the Frontera Kitchen only knows me as Lila.
Wow.
So that's where Lila came from.
Amazing.
And so for me, it says a lot because it speaks to my my story between the two worlds. Like it speaks to my story between being very, very comfortable in that culture, but also recognizing that I'm a bit of an ambassador, you know? Like I am a bit of a I go out and I represent and I advocate for understanding and appreciation and, you know, the right way to do things and the corn and, you know, ingredients and, you know, integrity and all those sort of things, which I think Mexican food, like a lot of people think it's supposed to be cheap and covered in cheese and fried and, you know, something that it's not. And I think that education is coming. It's been quite a 5 years and the sort of global growth of appreciation of regional Mexican food in the last 5 years, but it wasn't always like that, you know? Even here still.
Yeah. So that's what I want to mention now, is run me through the sort of culinary or the menu journey for any listeners or viewers who have not been there yet.
Yeah. So the real crux of what it is that we're doing and why it's so important is the tortilla. So the Mexican tortilla is either corn or flour. And that comes from a region. So Mexico, similar to India, has a northern arid where wheat grows and a southern tropical where corn grows, similar to the way India, the country as well. So the northern part where wheat grows is where people eat flour tortillas, the norteño cuisine. The Monterrey, San Luis Potosí, there's a couple other sort of serious cities up in the north, and they are famous for eating delicious flour tortillas. The southern part of Mexico, sort of below Ciudad de Mexico and below, grow corn. Incredible heirloom corn, red corn, white corn, blue corn, yellow corn, all sorts of different corn. And they make corn tortillas. And so the original tradition around corn tortillas is that you soak your corn overnight in an alkaline solution. It softens the hull, and it makes it pliable enough that when you grind it, it's a wet dough and you make corn tortillas directly. That is the traditional, it's called nixtamalization, which is the traditional way that corn tortillas are made. You know, big agriculture got involved in the 60s in Mexico and invented corn flour. Maseca is the name of the company that invented the corn flour. And they said, well, you know, this product is very fresh. It sours in a day. It's very, you know, perishable. Let's make it easier for like Mexican housewives in Mexican villages to like have an accessible corn product. So they developed this culture, this idea of they do that whole process and then they dry it. And then you add water to it and you reconstitute it and you make a corn tortilla. But something is very lost in that process. The corn tortilla never has as much flavor. It never has as much elasticity. A lot of times people complain, oh, my corn tortilla breaks. It's because it's made with this corn flour and it's reconstituted and you've lost those natural bonds that exist within that softened corn material. So there's been a real growth in this movement outside of Mexico in the last 5 to 10 years. There was all of a sudden more demand outside, and there's companies that started exporting. There's companies that were working with the small farmers. There didn't used to be much of a demand for the heirloom corn. They would just use the sort of more conventional because it was easier and more consistent. But chefs people like me, people like, other chefs in Copenhagen and
Artisans,
right. I mean, honestly, you can look it up now. There are mills in Paris, Copenhagen, Stockholm, London. I mean, they're all over. This culture for what it is we're doing. So at Lila, we import our own corn. We bring it in direct with a supplier that is old friend of mine, and we do that process every day. So we soak the corn
every day.
Every day. Flour, corn masa dries out and sours by the end of the day. So it must be done every day. And our dry masa from the end of the day we use for chips the next day because chips are supposed to be more dry. That way they don't puff in the middle. And so that's
less food waste also.
Less food waste also, exactly. And so we have zero waste in our masa program. And so that we do every day and will be scaled up when we open the new project at Al Circle. So Lila Molino and Cafe is going to be opening, inshallah, right after Eid. And that is going to be a big push at a scaled up, more accessible way for us to sell tortillas.
Right.
We wish to become the source for any of the other taquerias and restaurants here in the region that want to buy good quality, nixtamalized heirloom corn tortillas. Come to us.
Wow, amazing.
We will sell them to you happily. And so that's going to be opening soon. So we're bringing in all the equipment and we are bringing in boatloads of corn, all the different colors, to be able to make those tortillas. So that's a huge part of what we do at Lila Taqueria. The other thing, obviously, is the wood fire. It's in the name, right? So live fire is a big part of the Mexican culinary tradition. Roasting it in a pit, roasting it on a grill, more of a barbecue style. Like, it's a huge part of the Mexican culinary tradition. So we have a really gorgeous wood grill, and almost everything we do at Lila is kissed by that fire. So those are the big parts of what we do at the taqueria. Is we do tacos, snacks, chips and salsa, chips and guacamole, churros, salted caramel sauce, the sort of hallmark classics of like the taco cuisine of Mexico.
But I think the thing that's also quite amazing, and I've been here for 12 years, and originally people used to want to go to these gigantic restaurants.
Sure.
Right?
Totally. With everything on the menu.
Yes, everything.
100 dishes.
Yes. So then when you come to Lila, what I love is the fact that you have these almost two sections to the restaurant. You walk in, you don't sort of see too much, like, okay, it's nice. And then you walk up the stairs into this life, basically. So you have the restaurant on one side, and then you have the kitchen that you can see on the other. And so you come in, it's very unassuming, super humble, beautiful. But then when you sit down, you have the service, and then the food comes along, and then you get bang, smashed in the face with this incredible flavor. Was that the vision originally for yourself and Tarek?
Yeah, I mean, I think it was smart for us to start small. It was smart for us to say we need to prove ourselves a little. We need to, we could have, I mean, maybe if we had said we want to open, a licensed concept with, 100 seats, it might have taken us like another year, maybe 2, to figure it out, raise money, find a location, put together the staff, etc. So I think looking back now, Tarek and I have this conversation a lot. Like, would we change anything? Like, if we could go back like a year and a half, would we have changed anything? I don't think so. Like, we opened the taqueria like 4 days after our projected opening that we had put on the calendar in September. Like, we were right on time.
Wow, okay.
And it really set up, because that's not really how real, like, meaty Dubai projects don't, like, our Molino right now, for example, is a couple months late because this is how it is. And I think it was a really great time for us because we did something that was reasonably small. And it allowed us to like learn, not with so much at stake. Like, we got to like fail a little bit, and we got to like figure out like what grease traps are supposed to do here, and we got to figure out
the horrid grease traps.
Yeah, and what civil defense is about, and we got to figure out like all these things that you have to figure out when you're doing Dubai restaurants.
Well, and you have a wood fire. So
and we had the wood fire. And the wood fire never
Mm-hmm.
would have happened at any of the big developers. They would have killed it.
Yeah.
They don't allow it. So we got lucky because we were sort of like off the beaten path, that Jumeirah allowed us the flexibility because we could. It's, our hood goes right to the roof, right out. We don't have to like snake through like you would at a big development, a big mall, right? You'd have to like, and then that's fire, and then that's, all the things that people don't like. And so we got lucky because we got to do whatever we wanted to do there. Our landlord is the family that lives behind us, and they've always been very supportive and very, helpful. And it felt like a very sort of small little community that we created. And I think we were able to fill it, and we were able to create that energy pretty quickly because it was something that was like manageable. And we always have had bigger ambitions. Like we've always, had this whole road ahead of us. And I think the way that the taqueria happened was perfect for us. Would I have loved an outdoor cozy space? Sure. Would I have loved like a beach view? Sure. Would I have loved, all these other things? But I think like at the end of the day, it gave us the ability to make an impact,
But I think you did absolutely the right thing, to be honest.
Yeah.
By having a smaller space,
Mm-hmm.
you can really focus on
Totally.
all of the details.
Totally.
Plus, when I was there, you were like a hawk everywhere.
You were there relatively early.
Super early, yeah.
I remember.
Yeah,
you introduced
early.
yourself to me, and
Yeah.
I remember, again, like, I didn't know anybody when we opened, James. Like, I didn't know, like, God bless Samantha, Food Diva. I had no idea who she was. And she came into the restaurant. She was one of the first bloggers to find us very early. Like, we opened in December, and she was there, like, early February. And I didn't know. I had no idea. And then somebody else comes in and is like, do you know who that is? And I was like, who? But now it's so funny because it's almost like quaint looking back and thinking about all these people that made a big impact on what we did, all these people that helped us reach this wider audience. And the community here is small. It's a cozy little community, like those of us that are in this F&B world.
Yeah, absolutely.
And now I know so many people. And now opening the Molino, it's like I did the friends and family like list, and there's 100 people on it. And like when we did the one for taqueria, there was like 3 people on it. Like we didn't know.
Wow.
We didn't know anybody. We didn't know, we didn't know anything. And so that people found us was sort of testament, I guess, to what we were doing. People introduced themselves to me. People said, like you said, hi, I love what you're doing. And like, this is what I do. And I was like, oh, this is cool. Like there's all these people that are here that are like advocating. And, some of the bloggers changed our business. Like they just literally changed our business.
But I think the other thing that you're not saying, sure, is the fact that what you do, as in the product. So apart from beautiful, warm welcome, apart from the hospitality,
Mm-hmm.
which is very prevalent,
Mm-hmm.
is the actual food is made, as you said, with love. Everything is super fresh.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's the thing that keeps people, of course, one of the key areas that things people come back. The amount of times that I've spoken to several different people, and they just mention you with your pop-ups, and it's the consistency.
Totally.
Also, the consistency of what you do.
Yeah.
So, but tell us how Molino, the new one, came about.
Yeah, I mean, we've always we will do many things within the region. We want to do more taquerias. You mentioned pop-up. We were at Couture this winter. We're going to do more food festivals this year. Again, like we weren't really on people's radars last year, and so they didn't come to us. Well, this year they've invited us to various food festivals that are happening this year. And so I think there's a real opportunity around the ingredient stuff and around. So the taqueria is traditionally in Mexico, tacos are eaten in the evening, traditionally, specifically the grilled ones we call al carbon or grilled over wood. They're eaten at night. Pastor usually is at night, for example. That's why we do our pastor after 3:00.
Right.
But there's just like, other sort of big, broad culinary traditions, there's specific foods that you eat in the day and there's specific foods that you eat at night. The Molino is the day food of Mexico. So it's Mexican breakfast every day. And it's this sort of, I call fondas are the word for fonda in Mexico is sort of like a cozy, sort of homey restaurant that you might have the food from like your mom.
Okay.
Trying to think, it's like maybe like an osteria in Italian, maybe. But so this is the food of the fondas of Mexico. So enchiladas, torta, griddled Mexican sandwiches, big brothy caldo, meal in a bowl caldos. The other sort of shapes of the masa, so tamales, the little fat gordita tortillas filled with stuff, tostadas, flautas, the rolled crispy. So the different shapes, along with pastries. So
Are you going to be doing all of this in Molina?
yeah.
Oh, wow.
Definitely. It's a totally different menu. Yeah. So it's the all-day food of Mexico. So Lila Wood-Fired Taqueria has a very specific menu offer. This is Lila Molino and Cafe. So so this is going to be the approach of the Molino is going to be it'll be like a day restaurant first to start. Let's see what happens in the future. We have no idea. But there's a big production space where we're going to be making and selling tortillas, salsa, and chips.
Oh, amazing.
Yeah. So we're really excited about that. I mean, everybody's always asking us, like, especially other, people who have tacos in their menus, maybe not even Mexican restaurants, but there's a lot of people that have tacos in their menus that
nachos are plenty in the city.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, our good friends at, Surf House around the corner from us, he's always had a fish taco in his menu and things like that, And so what we want to be able to do is offer tortillas for people to buy, be a supplier for B2B, for other restaurants, and then distribute with the grocery stores. And so we want to do tortillas, chips, and salsa. We'll do our red and our green salsa, all as much as we can. We're trying to still figure out sourcing. But a big part of also what we do, you mentioned freshness, is we work with farms, a lot of farms from the UAE. Specifically, we have a really great relationship with one outside of Abu Dhabi, and they grow tomatillos, poblanos, jalapenos, serranos for us, as well as their own Roma tomatoes. And almost all of our vegetables we get from them.
How amazing is that, though, for you?
Incredible. I brought the seeds back. I mean, I can't. Can I take this?
Please. It's okay. Because I just want to say, sure, I mean, it's actually, I think it's remarkable that in such a short space of time, you've had such incredible success. But that's because I think of your past when it comes to food and being driven to really deliver incredible results. Because what I really want to understand now is that, as you are very well aware, for me, Dubai is the culinary capital of the Middle East.
Sure.
And there are a lot of chefs, so.
And a lot of restaurants.
Yeah. So when you first came here, obviously everybody's like, hi, Shaw, who are you? What are you doing? Right. But now everyone knows you for being a hardcore serious chef. So I want to, because we have Michelin, we have 50 Best, so on and so forth. What are the aspirations for the restaurant in that respect?
Yeah, I mean, I always try to understand. I want to just do the best we can possibly do. I respect tremendously the awards and the accolades. How we are recognized, I think, is up to people's decisions. One thing I will definitely say is Dubai is a fancy food town. There's a lot of, very tasting menus, and there's a lot of very fancy food. We aren't quite that. So sometimes I just sort of qualify our expectations based on knowing that the community really loves a swing for the fences, expensive tasting menu here. Maybe other places in other parts of the world, they recognize street food vendors with the Michelin Guide, but I don't really see that being necessarily what would happen here just because of the community and because of the options. And so for me, the most important is just having a full restaurant every night. I mean, I just like our staff being inspired and us, changing the menu with the vegetables that are available at the farm and being what people think of when they want Mexican. Sure, like we always love recognition, but recognition, I only really care much about if it brings butts and seats.
Yeah,
Like,
absolutely.
yeah. So for me, it's like that for me is the bigger. And so telling our story is really important because I think it helps bring butts on seats. And it helps people know about us. And so that I think is something that's actually, I think maybe far more interesting is, you know, doing something like this, for example, versus because people will hear it and they'll hear our story. And maybe if, you know, we're, I don't know, mentioned in something, maybe they won't necessarily hear our story. It'll just be a footnote. You know, I'm grateful again when all these, you know, there are writers and our bloggers here in town when they get us and they write something about us that is like, oh, you got it. And that really, I think, brings me a lot of joy because it's like some people get it and some people don't, you know. Some people just, they think we're just tacos and, you know, nachos. And I think one of the writers, I think one time wrote like, it's a totally like average. And I'm like, okay, never mind. Like, you don't get it, you know, like, it's fine. I get it. It's okay. Like,
but look, I'll interject here because yes, you're absolutely right. And I'm going to get in trouble for this. There are lots of fancy schmancy restaurants, okay? Which is fine, right?
They're good too. It's fine, yeah.
Now I'm going to tell you where I stand on it when it comes from a hardcore chef point of view. So, in all honesty, I only care about the taste of everything.
Yeah.
Right? So when it comes to the fancy schmancy stuff, great. Very happy for you. I'm going to go in and I'm going to taste. And 50% of the time, it doesn't deliver.
Sure.
It doesn't deliver because those chefs are not focused on the end result of what's on the plate.
Sure.
Whereas when I go to you 100% understand and focus on the food. And that's what I'm saying to you. I think apart from butts on seats, which is absolutely true, I do believe that more things will come to fruition for you through accolades because of the incredible standards that you are setting when it comes to that type of food. You know, because I would much rather come to you and spend my hard-earned money with something which is super delicious and tasty and go somewhere else and I'm going to spend 4 or 5 times the amount and then I'm going to get disappointed.
Totally.
You see what I mean?
I mean, this is the thing that I think that's so interesting, I think, as well, is this, and I think, again, like a lot of the people that are framing this conversation in Dubai now, like a lot of people are activating for this and saying like, we only do homegrown or we only do this because they are trying to sort of, you know, advocate for that conversation and advocate for like, you know, is the person who came up with this idea, are they in the restaurant? Are they ever in the restaurant? Are they ever here? We don't know. Like, we're not really sure. And I think also like, I think there's a value for money thing at some point, right? And I think for some people it doesn't matter, but for a growing, you know, number of sort of middle class, upper middle class, like creative community in Dubai, it does matter. Like, it's not just like everybody here has Lamborghinis, as we all know,
absolutely.
you know? And that's, I think, sometimes people's perception when they come in with these global brands from outside is that that's what they're catering for. But like, what about me? What about you? What about like those of us that will be like, I don't know if I'm going to go out and spend, you know, 2,000, 3,000 dirhams or something like that for dinner.
No,
you know?
but you still crave to be in a space that you love, full of amazing humans and amazing food.
100%.
Right?
Yeah, 100%.
So, and what I love, especially now, you know, the government here and the entire country's really got behind homegrown.
They are.
And championing it so much. And I think it's amazing.
I 100% agree. Like, I think there's, you know, there's a meaty group of us to champion, you know, which I think is that also wasn't necessarily there for a long time. But now there's a very, you know, substantial group of people to champion, doing concepts that are like inspired by their stories here and telling stories that are connected to the sourcing here and telling stories that, and they're in the restaurants, you know, they're in the restaurants every night. So
now we've come to the quick fire questions.
I'm ready.
First things first. And I think I know this answer. Favorite ingredient?
Oh God. I mean,
just the one?
Lime.
Lime?
Yeah.
I thought you were going to say corn. I was surprised.
Corn is important, but it's on a flavor profile. I would have said corn, but
lime also. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Lime over lemon for me.
Oh, definitely lime.
Sweet or salty?
Salty.
guacamole or salsa?
So the thing is this. Guacamole is incredible and wonderful, but it doesn't change. And salsa, there's 100.
Right.
So I think salsa can be everything. It can be hot. It can be, well, it should be cold, but it can be raw. It can be fried. It can be cooked. So definitely salsa.
Very good.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I have to do this. Tacos or shawarma?
God, you're going to get me in trouble. I mean, you know my answer. Of course, tacos. But I'm going to be participating in this shawarma showdown.
Oh,
that's happening. I don't know if
right,
this is
this
has come to you, come up on your radar yet. But I was really, really, really pleased to be invited by the guys at Mitsunami because we're going to have this long conversation about what is shawarma.
Amazing.
And it's going to be really fun.
That's really cool.
As you know, we do the pastor at the restaurant. So, but definitely tacos forever.
Okay. All right. Pickled or spicy?
Spicy.
Who would you say, what would you say, as of this moment, are your top 3 cuisines that you love to eat?
Ooh, outside of Mexican, right?
Yes.
Okay. Thai, Indian, and maybe Vietnamese.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Nice.
Definitely.
Beautiful flavor profile, spice.
Acid,
yeah,
spice, fresh, herby. It can be heavy, it can be rich. I've had this conversation with many people about incredible similarities between Indian culinary tradition and Mexican. The North-South, the different regions, the way the flavors come together, the sort of alchemy that comes with the sauce making. It's incredible. Like, I think that, eating with your hands, street food, there's so many. So I think that there's so many conversations between India and Mexico when it comes to food.
I'm looking forward to you doing a tasting menu on that. Sounds very interesting.
Definitely. I'm already musing.
Okay, very good. Who would you say are your top 3 culinary heroes? And they don't necessarily need to be chefs.
Diana Kennedy, who's this culinary historian that I worked for a number of years. She was sort of the original cookbook author and culinary anthropologist for Mexico. I think the world of Nancy Silverton. I think she's just makes incredibly delicious food and also has an integrity with her staff and has just been doing it for a very long time. And also is sort of kind of home cook, kind of obviously very professional, etc. I also really, I'm leaving Rick out because it's an obvious one. So I think he knows. Yeah, he knows. Gabriela Camara runs restaurants in Mexico, Contramar, Entremar. She's also, I named 3 women on purpose, runs incredible culinary empire and is sort of its creative director. And I really resonate with that role. And I really resonate with the idea of curation. So those would be my 3.
So then from all of your years within hospitality and in kitchens, what was the funniest ever incident that you've seen or been involved in?
I mean, I think my favorites have to be when we would be in very challenging environments on our trips with the Bayless crew, the Frontera crew. We go to Mexico and we'd be like cooking on the beach, or we'd be like cooking in a loft, or we'd be like cooking in a market, and we'd be barefoot and we'd be washing, seafood and salt water from the ocean, and we'd be trying to figure out like, how do we, keep this away from the animals that are running around, and how do we keep this away from, the monkey that's over there or something like that. Because you always, a lot of times when you go to these food festivals, like food and wine festivals in different, cities in Mexico, you have to try to be creative. So I think those are my favorite memories.
Wow. A lot to take in there.
Yeah.
What would you say, or what would be your advice for 16-year-old Shaw?
Be patient.
Chef's worst enemy.
Yeah, exactly. Be patient. Get to Mexico as soon as possible. and be humble.
Now, what advice would you give to anyone who is, or any young chefs, restaurateurs who are looking to get into business within hospitality?
Find your story. So travel, find what it is that is your story. It's a hard one. I know there's this larger conversation happening now about interns and stages. Everybody's trying to sort of come to terms with the fact that there's a huge crew within the kitchen that is unpaid. And it's a hard thing because not everybody can afford to be unpaid. But as much as possible, stage. As much as possible, if you can stage for a week, if you can stage for a couple days, it can really impact how you see the world, because every kitchen's a little different. Every chef is a little different. And, maybe you don't need to spend years there, but spend time staging. Travel, eat a lot, separate from, the culinary school side of something. And just, try to find your person. I found mine. I got very lucky, obviously. But you find your person and, try to put yourself in that situation as much as possible.
Now, if anybody wanted to get hold of you via social media,
Lila Taqueria, or my
do that?
name. Yeah, either way. So it's either Lila Taqueria on Instagram or my name, Lash.
Perfect.
Either way, people can get to me directly.
I'll put all of that in the show notes as well, so then everyone knows what's going on. Now, sure, I just wanted to recap on our conversation because it's been phenomenal. From your early childhood in Mexico, in that restaurant, which must have set you a lifetime's worth of culinary foundation and business, which I think is phenomenal. Then growing up, studying politics, to then being in this incredible surrounding with Rick and his team, to then 7 years is not a joke, man. And also that's amazing to be in that space. R&D, to then go into production, which is also, I think, fantastic. A totally different experience, but almost the same.
Sure.
When it comes to managing people. Through then the journey to Amsterdam. And then Lila was born, to then coming to the region and honestly having incredible success, but it's been hard work, but I think absolutely amazing. And you are recognized within so many foodie worlds and beyond. So on behalf of the ChefJKP podcast, I just wanted to say thank you so much for taking the time to be here. Keep pushing forward with what you do. Keep inspiring everyone. Really, I cannot wait to see what the business and what yourself are going to move forward with. Thank you very, very much for being here.
Thank you for having me. It was a pleasure.
Thank you.